Well, welcome to EHour, everybody. I presume all of you can hear me, see me, and we are going to have a pleasure of a conversation today. We are thankfully joined for the second week in a row by a fellow COE grad, Aisha Bowie here. Thank you so much for having us join you today. Sincerely appreciate you making the time to do that. And before I get into introducing our incredible guest that we have joining us today, we want to go through just a couple quick announcements. And those are that I want to let you know, one of the classes we talked about last week, the Ethics and Organizational Startups, is still open. We still have a couple spots left. So if you're looking at it, you're thinking about it, you want to sign up with an instructor who is an HR professional in 2 different countries and who is just a rock star individual, Allison Bailey, please consider doing so and going on the CFE's website to get more information about that today. And I also want to let you know that we do have a little bit of a announcement here that I'm going to share my screen with so we can go over. All right, can somebody give me a hands up or a thumbs up on our end if they can see my presentation?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. Let me try that one more time. We'll get there. Any luck on that, Nick?
We're seeing your screen for Zoom.
Okay. How about now?
There we go. ENTR.
Perfect. Love it. Okay, students, thank you for your patience. We are working this out. I promise we're going to get there. This is week 2, and I think we're doing pretty good. So far, so good. So this is the big, bold, yellow update that you have. Right now, I want to let you know that going forward, we are going to require that you have to be logged in at least 45 minutes on Zoom in order to get credit for class that day. Anything less than 45 minutes is not going to count and will be one of your 2 allotted absences that you get for this semester. So 2 different side notes. I'm being very generous in telling you on that. One, we get the Excel file out of Zoom. So we've got the exact breakdown of when you're with us. So there's really no point in trying to argue with it after the fact, or don't come up to us saying, oh, I was logged in, it didn't work, what have you. You're either logged in or you're not. You've got plenty of time to kind of figure that out leading up to class. And if anybody has any questions, we're always happy to answer those, but wanted to clarify that for you now. The second little anecdote off of that is that there's not going to be any opportunity for making up class with recordings. We are not going to end up having those on YouTube. So again, happy to answer any questions. Go ahead and ping us at that ENTR 407 email that's in the syllabus. And we look forward to answering anything that you have there, but wanted to offer that point of clarity. So recapping again a little bit of what we mentioned last week: try, risk, fail, do. This is going to be the pillared conversation that you hear from every speaker every week. And I can't think of, and I know I sound like I'm just being crazy generous to him, but I'm being honest, I really can't think of a speaker I would rather have you hear from in the first week than our guest that we have today. I look at these four action words, items, pillars, and he undoubtedly has embraced them all throughout his career. And I'm looking forward to having him tell you about that. So who is he and why am I talking about this? So like I was saying, I'm happy to have him, but then I was thinking, like, when I want to introduce Inder, what is it that I really want to make the students aware of? What is it they want to know? I don't think we've ever had a more topical or timely speaker, given what's going on with COVID and given the work that he's done and the career that he's built around this industry. But also, about half of you are LSA students, a quarter, or about a half of you are, about a half of you are engineering students, about a third of you are LSA, and he gets to share that lineage with both of you. He has a bachelor's in economics and bioengineering, which he actually created before it was a degree at Michigan. He also has 2 degrees from a little place called MIT on the East Coast, but not nearly as important as Michigan, clearly. He's built an incredibly dedicated career path towards an industry, and within this industry of infectious disease prevention, global health data. And he has been battling this since he really was at Michigan and then thereafter. He founded his current company, Kinsa, in 2012 with the goal of creating a global real-time outbreak for monitoring and detection of infectious disease. He previously joined us about 7 years ago in 2013, shortly after he created that company. And in the midst of what I have to imagine is the busiest era his company's had, he's now agreed to share some time with us again today. So I will give him a preemptive notice and ask him to turn on his video if he's willing to at this point in time. And then I want to just welcome him. And if you were in person, I'd say a huge round of applause. So instead, you'll have to know that it's coming to you, Inder, but thank you so much for joining us today. And Inder Singh, please carry it away. I'll go over your slides for you.
Eric, you have to unmute him.
Will do.
Hey guys, how are you? Thanks, Eric, for the very, very kind introduction. It's really nice to speak with you all. I'm a alum, obviously. I have a few questions to begin with, just to set the stage. So if you can raise your hands using the Zoom hand raise, I'd be grateful. How many of you guys have ever heard of Kinsa before?
We got some hands going up.
Some hands. Okay, so I might tell you a little bit more about that. How many of you all have participated in dance marathon at the University of Michigan?
So far, more on Kinsa.
So I'll tell you. Well, actually, why don't we jump to the first try slide, Eric? I don't know if you're able to jump there. There we go. So I am the founder of Dance Marathon at the University of Michigan. And it is one of the things that I tried in college. And I'll tell you more about my career in a moment. The short of it is I've been a part of a number of startups, both in the nonprofit space and the for-profit space. I'll concentrate a little bit more of my comments on Kinsa because I think it's relevant to the current time frame, and obviously this is the work that I'm doing today. But I want to take a moment to talk about the opportunity that you all have while at the University of Michigan. I have 5 degrees. No one needs 5 degrees. It's absurd how much time I've spent in college. But I will tell you that throughout the course of my education, whether it was grad school or undergrad, the things I learned the most were outside of the classroom. And there were opportunities to engage at the University of Michigan that taught me things that honestly, I don't know that I would have learned for 10 years or 15 years into my career. Dance Marathon was the foundation of what I've done for the rest of my career. Many people get satisfaction. People get satisfaction in different ways. And the satisfaction I found in being a part of that organization and seeing the look in the faces of the children and the families was perhaps the greatest satisfaction I've ever felt. And I said, how do I do that again? So for the rest of my career, better or worse, I've spent my career working on issues around children's health and social entrepreneurship. And again, I would just encourage you to take advantage of whatever those resources are outside of the classroom while you're in college, while you have the time, while you have the space to sort of explore. Because once you get into industry, it becomes a little harder to do that. Those were amazing learning opportunities for me. I still use those learning opportunities. I still use the things that I learned in Dance Marathon today. How do you motivate people? How do you create a mission-driven culture? Those are things that I learned and enhanced over time, but learned while I was at Dance Marathon at the University of Michigan. So my first try slide is really about just getting out there and exploring while you're in college, while you have the opportunity. Eric, could you mind going to the next slide? The second thing that I'll just talk a little bit about was an extension of that work. I had an opportunity after graduate school, which laid the foundation for my work at Kinsa, to join the Clinton Foundation. At the Clinton Foundation, long story short, it was a dream job. I ran around the world I didn't live in any one location. I ran around the world in a suitcase, running from hotel to hotel, working on behalf of President Clinton and a consortium of 70 developing countries to improve access to medicines. So my claim to fame in the very narrow world of public health is that I was the person who brokered the deals that dropped the price of drugs for AIDS, malaria, TB, and other products on behalf of this consortium of 70 developing countries. All told, about $1.5 billion in cost savings, and we put millions of people onto life-saving treatment. This was not just me, it was my team too. It was an extraordinary team of people. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. But that set the stage for the rest of the work that I'm doing at Kinsa. And these were things that I tried, right? There was lots of risks along the way, and I can tell you that I failed numerous times at each one of those points, in each one of those experiences. But I'll talk a little bit more about the failures that we had at Kinsa than I will talk about them at those points. So for those of you that don't know about Kinsa, I'll just give you a little background. And Eric, if it's okay, I'm actually going to share my screen, if you don't mind me allowing me to share, just to give you guys a little bit of background on what we do at Kinsa. All right, hopefully you can see and hear this following video. It just gives you a little bit of background because I'm not sure that many people know what Kinsa does. And I think it's pretty timely. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, hopefully you can hear this. I've set the audio so you can hear it.
They say that knowledge is power. Never has that been more true than with the COVID-19 crisis. Early knowledge on where and when illness is spreading gives us the power to stop it, keeping our country and economy safe and protecting our way of life. Kinsa has built an early warning system to track and stop the spread of illness. With more than 1 million smart thermometers in use across the country today, our system detected COVID-19 spread nearly 3 weeks before case numbers surged. With this early information on where illness is starting and spreading, our leaders can make informed decisions on how best to keep our communities safe, healthy, and prosperous. Because fever is so often the first sign of a contagious illness like COVID, the more Americans using Kinsa thermometers, the more precise our early warning system can be. Our homes, our schools, and our workplaces are the foundations of our society. These are also the places where illness spreads fast, so we focus our efforts here. While completely protecting individual privacy, Kinsa gives your community the knowledge needed to stop the spread. With more information on what's going around, schools and workplaces can take actions like increased disinfecting, testing, or use of protective gear. And this same information gives you the knowledge to make the right decisions for your family. If you're healthy but may have been exposed at work or school, Kinsa guides you to the right actions to stay well. If you or a loved one is sick, Kinsa helps you detect and respond to your illness. By using Kinsa, you help yourself and your family get better faster. You help your community stop the spread of illness. And you help your healthcare system, your state, and your country contain outbreaks early. Because knowledge is power.
So that's what we do at Kinsa. This is not new to us. This is work that we've been doing for the last 9 years. And the problem that we started with, I'll articulate the problem statement, and I'll articulate it in the form of a question. And I think everyone here understands this tacitly today. They really understand this question, whereas 6 months ago, people may not have understood this tacitly. How do you stop an outbreak before it becomes an epidemic, or God forbid, a pandemic, if you don't know where and when it's starting? The answer to that question is you don't. And the flame of an outbreak becomes the inferno of an epidemic, and today, in the inferno of a pandemic. This is the problem I saw when I was at the Clinton Foundation. All this wonderful work that we were doing at the Clinton Foundation to improve access to medicines for AIDS and malaria and TB was great. But unless we knew where to direct those resources, the drugs, the diagnostics, the vaccines, the things that work, we didn't know how to direct them to the right people at the right time, we weren't going to stop the spread. So I started Kinsa after years of frustration with this problem at the Clinton Foundation and thought to myself, there's got to be a better way to do outbreak detection. There's got to be a better way to forecast who's going to be affected by illness. So we started this 9 years ago. And what we did was very simple. We said, in order to get better data, a lot of you guys are engineers, you guys know this. I'm going to use the harsh form of this phrase. In any analysis, garbage in equals garbage out. If you've got garbage data inputs, the results are not very useful. And the data we use today for outbreak detection and forecasting, and the data we used until Kinsa came along, was virtually garbage. It was data that was delayed. It was data that didn't get to the root of what you needed to identify outbreaks in real time and forecast them. And it's not rocket science. If you want to know where and when outbreaks are occurring, you got to know where and when symptoms are starting well before the healthcare system knows it today. You've got to know how fast it's spreading. And that's what we do at Kinsa. This is the risk we took. 9 years ago, we said, how do we get those data? And what we did was we invested in reinventing the thermometer, turning it into a connected device, recognizing that it's really the only behavior in the home when someone falls ill. There's no other consistent behavior in the home when someone falls ill. Besides comforting your child, if it's a child, what do? The only thing you can do to confirm illness is grab a thermometer. So we wanted to piggyback on that behavior and create a connected version of it, a version so that we could talk to people and understand GPS level symptom onset, ask them a series of questions about all sorts of other symptoms, help them, because otherwise why would they use the product? Help them and aggregate data from millions of those users so we could start seeing where and when symptoms are spreading and how fast they were spreading in the home, how fast they were spreading in the school, and how fast they were spreading in the workplace. Those are the three primary nodes of disease transmission. That's where disease spreads. So we've got programs in each. It took 4 years to get to scale. So I spent a long time introducing a consumer product. Didn't realize how hard it is to get consumer products to scale. I was a little naive, but we got there. And then it took 2 years of getting data at that level for us to even confirm the hypothesis that if you can get real-time symptom data and understand the speed of its spread, you could actually do things like outbreak detection and forecasting. So it took 6 years to get there. We were there. And fast forward today, we can now predict flu spread up to 5 months in advance on a city-by-city basis. Let's compare that to the next best. The next best is CDC's primary academic partner, Carnegie Mellon. And by the way, this division that does forecasting is run by the head of machine learning at Carnegie Mellon, right? We're talking about one of the best computer science departments in the world. We are not smarter than he is and his team. We just have better data. They can predict flu spread 3-4 weeks out on a state or multi-state level. We can do it up to 5 months on a city level. So that just shows the fidelity of the data input, that our core hypothesis about how to gather data was correct. When COVID-19 hit, things changed. And I'll come to that point in just a moment. But let me talk about the journey along the way. Let's talk about failure for a second. And I'm going to leave you with a few quick messages that are going to come back at the very end. If you're going to start a business, please only start a business if you're really passionate about the problem you're trying to solve. Because the number of companies that go sideways before they're successful, that's like 99.9% of companies go sideways before they're successful. This is hard. And I don't care if you're running a restaurant or a technology company. It is hard. So please, please take my advice here and don't try to start a company or join a founding team unless you are truly passionate about the problem you're solving. You can tell that I'm passionate about this problem. I've spent my life trying to solve this problem of how do you curb infectious disease. And let me tell you about the near-death experiences along the way at Kinsa. Remember, we've been doing this for 9 years. these are just some examples. We've had 5 near-death experiences where the company almost collapsed. These are 3 of them. We ran out of money multiple times. I recently talked to a former chief of staff of mine who's now the COO of a really successful company and doing some wonderful things. And he came to me and said to me, Inder, how did we survive for those 6 months when my models suggested that we had 0 money? And he said this, and I was reminded of this. I totally forgot about how difficult it was there. I think I blocked it out. And the sad fact is we literally raised money every 2 weeks to keep payroll going. This happened for a 5 to 6 month period. We also had external product risks. Our very, very first smart thermometer connected to the phone via the headphone jack. It was the least expensive electronic thermometer and connected device of any kind ever made. We've got patents galore on this. It was plastic and wires, and we leveraged the headphone jack in unique ways to resolve temperature at an FDA level, like medical device level. But then Apple and Google took the headphone jack away from us. This was 4 years into it, and we had to go rebuild the entire product portfolio from scratch. We essentially started from 0 again. We had proven some things, so our investors gave us money to do it, but that was really hard. We lost 2 years. Today, our Bluetooth thermometers are some of the best-selling thermometers of any kind on Amazon. So they're fantastic products. And even though we went through 2 years of hardship, the products themselves are even better than the original product, which is awesome. So check out Quick Care on Amazon if you want to buy a thermometer. You'll see it's one of the 2 highest rated and best-selling thermometers of any kind. 3, there was a period of time where I spent 6 years with lawyers, or 6 months with lawyers, excuse me. And probably at 75 or 80% of my time was spent with lawyers. And it had to do with recapitalizing the company. Without describing what recapitalization means, we had a difficult situation with the ownership structure of the company. And there were some of my colleagues that I started the company that it created some challenges. There were some challenges there. Could you imagine spending 6 months just trying to fix what you started without letting the company go? These are examples of things that I just did not anticipate that slowed us down significantly, but we had to persist through it and the only way to persist through these kind of things is if you have enough passion about the problem. All right, let's talk about what we did. Eric, if you don't mind getting to the next slide, that'd be great. Yeah. Go one more forward. On March 14th of this year, my team and I analyzed our data. And what we did was we turned our data on its head. We said, hey, there are cases piling up in King County, Washington, and Santa Clara. We're starting to see first COVID cases. Let's go look at our data. Let's look at our data in a unique way. Let's take our real-time signals and subtract out what we would normally expect from cold and flu season. In other words, let's look at unusual illness. Now, we had done this in the past in certain ways, and we have picked up anomalous strains of flu B in 2019, 2018. We've analyzed our data in other ways. In 2017, we actually called that it was going to be a really severe flu season. There's a New York Times article on how we called it 2.5 months before the CDC did, just because we had rich data, right? And we were trying to raise the alarms. We were still too small for people to really pay attention to us. We were still too small for people to really pay attention to us in March when COVID hit. But when we analyze this data, real-time data minus what we expect, what was left over is unusual. This is that map. And I called Dr. Nirav Shah, former New York State Health Commissioner, and I said, Nirav, can you jump on the phone? This is Saturday night. I'm really worried. We're seeing hotspots all over the country. He called a former FDA commissioner and the dean of a very prominent public health school who he happens to be friends with, and 10 minutes later, on a Saturday night, we're all on the phone with my team and them. And we spent an hour on the phone and we walked them through the science. We had a couple of our scientific collaborators come on. They said, Inder, this all sounds good and well, but you're showing me hotspots throughout the Northeast. You're showing me hotspots in Florida and in Michigan. That doesn't make any sense. We're not seeing cases there. They said, go back to the drawing board, look at the code, check if there's a bug, etc. 4 or 5 days later, we came back and we said, listen, we think it's sound. And by that point, we started seeing the first case counts in those areas. So we said it's a moral imperative, and my team, in under 48 hours, launched healthweather.us. That's typically an 18-month launch time frame. You go through peer review on the science, you put the product together, you make sure the user experience is correct, blah, 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 right? We launched it in under 48 hours because we felt it was a moral imperative. Healthweather.us, there's now been 3 front page New York Times articles on it, Fox News, Rachel Maddow, you name it. It's been referenced by everyone. And there's been 150 different public health and scientific leaders who've looked closely at the data. As far as we can tell, Kinsa's data, not all of it's available on healthweather.us. We're doing a big overhaul of healthweather.us in the next 2 weeks. Some of it's available there. As far as we can tell, it is the only effective, scientifically supported leading indicator of COVID-19 in the community. We have about a 2 to 4 week leading indicator. We now work with 5 states and 3 cities, including prominent large cities, to surface insights to help them understand and get ahead of the pandemic. We work on an early warning system. That's our role in the world. There has never been an effective early warning system for outbreaks until we came along with this data. We need to use it today, and we need to deploy more smart thermometers across the US so we can get even more precise, geographically precise data, down to call it a couple zip codes in a population center. Imagine what we could do with that. I'll close with one last comment. In New York City, we saw the outbreak 18 days before cases surged. Columbia researchers did a recent publication saying, had New York City issued a stay-at-home order 1 week earlier, we saw it 18 days in advance, it would have saved 36,000 lives and $1 billion. That's what's possible with an early warning system. Again, what we want to make sure happens today is that A, it's used. Yes, it's novel for many people. They haven't heard of it. They don't understand the details of it. We need to do the science to communicate that, but it needs to be used, not just for research, for policy decisions, used. And 2, we need to get more thermometers out there. With that, I'll close. Eric, I'm sorry I was longer than I expected.
Thank you so much, Inder, for absolutely fantastic presentation. So I just have to ask, COVID's rapid onset has undoubtedly had a large impact on the plans for Kinsa's growth in 2020. How would you grade yourself on how you've managed the situation?
Oh, I guess we should probably unmute you. That might be helpful to do. Okay, there you go.
Sorry, I muted myself and I won't mute myself going forward. I think we've done okay. I think we've certainly responded to demand for our products and services effectively. I'm pretty critical of myself and my team, and as anyone who works closely with me will tell you, I'm very critical. One of my greatest attributes as an entrepreneur is how critical I am, and another one is how I lack patience. It makes me a challenging husband, a very good entrepreneur. But as my wife, who works at Kinsa and is one of our leaders, will tell you, I think the things that we did wrong are things that I just didn't know. They were unknown unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wish we would have tripled down on our school program 2 months before we did. Because we've always known that that's the great way to distribute. Like, we have an early warning system in schools that works. We've run this program for years in Title I underserved communities. I think people understand today that underserved communities are being disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Newsflash, that's not new. That is true of any epidemic, every single epidemic in history. The underserved community is the community that suffers the most. Why? Because by definition, they don't have access to healthcare. By definition, they're going to be the ones that are going to be affected most. So we've been spending a lot of time in the underserved communities to track epidemics, et cetera. And we should have tripled down on that school program months earlier. We should have invested in government affairs 2 months earlier. We've been working outside of the government ranks for years, trying to build evidence so that we could go to government and say, you need to use this. And we should have gone harder at government, maybe a month before we did. So those are the kinds of things that I wish we would have done better. I wish, New York City was going to deploy a massive program recently, and then they got slammed with $100 million bill for testing in a way that they were not expecting. So there's a dearth of funds. I wish We would have talked to the teachers unions earlier to explain how useful an early warning system could be. Then maybe we could have been part of that. So these are examples of things that just are sequencing things. Some of them are unknown unknowns. We grew from 31 people in March to 80 people today. You know, our revenue has grown. We provide thermometers at or near cost for the public health imperative. And so it's not profitable, but our revenue has grown tremendously, more than almost 5x already year to date. And it'll probably end up being 8 or 10x by the end of the year. So I think we've managed it reasonably. We're a public health company. We don't call ourselves a tech company. We're a public health company. I'm a public health guy. We have a public health mission, and we are a public health company, period. And I wish we would have advanced like what we've always believed: schools, underserved schools, government engagement. I wish we would have acted on that even faster than we did. So I think we've done okay. I would give us a B+, A- rating. Certainly maybe an A- rating in certain ways, but a B+ rating in other ways. And I think we can do better going forward. Because if we do our work well, we've got to do it well. If we do our work well and do it fast, and if decision makers, governors, mayors, COVID-19 task forces, public health officials, and local school leaders, if they use the data, don't just look at it as interesting fodder, but they use it, we will easily save 100,000 or more lives over the next year. Those are two big ifs.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful to know. While you were talking, we had 2 student questions come in. I want to give them due. Real quick, give me the short and skinny on this one here, Inder. How do you protect yourself from external risks that you talked about with Apple and Google changing the headphone jack out and then rendering your product without an input?
I mean, it's just planning and looking around the corner. You try to do your best to make sure you identify risks and handle them. As I like to say, I hire executives who can peer around corners, right? Who are always thinking about the unknown unknowns, and they think in probabilistic terms. What's the likelihood that something's going to happen, and what's the impact if it does happen, and how much time do I need to spend against that kind of problem? So it's really just anticipating those and planning for it.
Got it. And then the second question that came in was, how many thermometers do you need from a specific region to get meaningful data?
It's not a direct calculation. These are power calculations. So essentially the way we look at it is on like, how do I look at one geography versus another? In a population center, we need less than 3% household penetration. It's like around, in New York City, it's like 1.5%, 2% household penetration. In other geographies that are more sparsely populated, it's higher. If we had we have 1.5 million thermometers across the United States. If we had 5 million activated thermometers across the United States, we could hotspot down to what we call the community level. It's essentially a couple zip codes in a population centers. Imagine what you could do with an early warning system for outbreaks if you could get that precise and you could get that far lead time, 3 weeks ahead. I mean, those are the kind of things that we want to do. So we want to a little more than triple the active user base this year if possible.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with investors, specifically the importance of aligning the investor incentive with your company's thesis?
I appreciate that you said that, Aisha. I don't know if you've heard me talk about this before, but I use that exact language. So you have to, listen, I was very particular about pitching a data thesis. Early warning is important. Early warning is where we're going to generate value. Early warning is what I want you to invest in. I don't want you to invest in the fact that we've got a really cool medical device that can do all sorts of triage features. That is not where I want you to invest. And I was very particular about going out there and being confident and adamant about that being the investment thesis. We were fortunate to find investors who believed in that. And what that did is it aligned our mission with their investment thesis. I don't have to worry about the difference in the profit motive of like medical devices because they believe in the investment thesis. They're supporting the core mission of the company. Had I gotten medical device investors, we would have deviated in what we wanted to do. Instead of working on early warning and data aggregation and giving away thermometers for free to schools, they would have said, well, let's try to figure out how to turn the thermometer into a triage device that can help channel people. So it's really, really critical to align your investors' incentives, the people who are backing you, with what you care about, your mission. I'm not a believer in double and triple bottom lines. I'm not sure if they still teach that stuff, but I don't believe in that one bit. And I'll tell you, as a practitioner who has turned capitalism on its head, both in my work in the Clinton Foundation and Kinsa, I think that is a bunch of BS. So I think what you need to do is align your incentives and align the revenue generation with the core mission. If those two things are aligned, you can scale. If those two things are not aligned, you can't scale. And nonprofits, and I've started nonprofits, the problem is that philanthropists change their mind and the revenue is no longer aligned with the activity of the company. So you need to align those two things, revenue and activity. And one way to do that with investors is to make sure their investment thesis is aligned with your mission. I don't have to worry about it. My investors believe in my mission. They want me to do early warning. So I never have to argue with them about doing anything, giving it away for free, getting people to use it. I never have to worry about that because they back me.
That's phenomenal. Thank you. So I'm going to merge a student question with a question that we also had prepped here. And that was kind of what you just touched about with aligning investment thesis and making that all gel together in a way that it becomes seamless is a critical part of your negotiation skill, which is something you were lauded at when you were at the Clinton Initiative. Give the students a tactic, a tip, a practical deployment that you use in your negotiation abilities. And the student question that was relevant to that was asked about how you form high profile partnerships like what was done with the NBA.
Yeah, so listen, the negotiations we do at Kinsa are much more straightforward. It is as opposed to the negotiations we did, which involved government, major pharmaceutical companies, regulators, and advocates at Clinton Foundations, 4-party negotiations. Those were really hard. So listen, I'll give you a very simple rule. The first thing I tell anyone who's coming into sales or negotiation at Kinsa is you always have a boss. I have a boss. Everyone has a boss. Why? Because in a negotiation in live real time, you don't want to make decisions. You want to say, listen, I need to check with my board. That's what I say. That's unless it's something I'm really willing to agree with. If it's something I anticipate, that's great. Listen, I'm not sure if my board's going to go for it. Let me come back to you, right? And the same thing is true with one of my people who's in the negotiation. Listen, I need to check in with our chief product officer or CEO. I understand where you're coming from. Let me get more information about it. Let me go back. Because in negotiations, you only have so many rounds of going back and forth. And so you don't want to commit to something live that boxes you in. You have a boss. I got to go check. I got a boss. I got to go check. Always have a boss in a negotiation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that works. Aisha, do you want to run with another question? I'll look at the student questions to see what gold I can pull out.
Yeah, so I have a question, and it's a hybrid actually of one that I was thinking about and one that I'm just plain curious based off of some of the student inputs. But do you have a plan to take the company profitable? And if so, what is it?
Absolutely. I mean, to be clear, it will depend. Listen, investors don't invest in a company, as you guys now know, for hardware. Like, we're not venture-backed companies. You don't raise venture capital money when you're selling a thermometer at 20 and 40 bucks. It's just not something that most people are going to be interested in, right? It's just too small a business. So it will directly depend on whether government and health systems and employers purchase our early warning systems. Now, we're getting a lot of traction, but we've got to build the business. And so if we build the business and if we can show them that this is important, not just during COVID times, I believe that this is necessary, basic 21st century infrastructure for outbreak detection. I believe that. We have early warning systems for asteroids and earthquakes and hurricanes. We've seen the hurricane warnings recently. We need an early warning system for outbreaks. Excuse me, I meant asteroids, hurricanes, and earthquakes. And we need an early warning system for outbreaks. We have one today that works. There's a body of scientific literature. So if those entities agree, preserve this infrastructure for even flu years, and we've demonstrated how much cost and lives you can save in flu years too, then I think we have a chance of going public quickly in 3 or 4 years, becoming profitable. But we've got to prove that. We've got to continue to generate the support. And a lot of this is political, right? A lot of this is, do governments buy in today? Can I get my public health colleagues on board? They've got 9,000 things coming at them in the middle of a crisis. This is another thing. I don't think about early warning. I'm not trained as a public health person to think about early warning. I think about all sorts of other things. I think about contact tracing. I think about syndromic surveillance. Why is your system better than syndromic surveillance? Like, all these questions abound. And so we need to cut through the morass, and we need to help educate and bring to light the importance of this kind of system for early warning. And if we successfully do that, and it is considered valuable enough to be preserved after COVID-19, we will get to a global scale level. Profit to me is only about getting to a global level. If I'm being really honest with you, I don't really care how much money the company makes. I care about creating a global early warning system for outbreaks. And if we succeed at that, the investment.
Yeah. Talk with you now. Do you see this honesty, this brash honesty of goodness?
Yeah, but let's be clear. If you do that, if you create a global scale early warning, my investors will be thrilled. They'll be thrilled, right? Because there'll be we will have figured out how to scale the system. So again, I don't really care about that. I care about a global early warning system.
Thank you. Thank you for that insightful answer. We're getting a couple questions in about data. How do you prevent the misuse of data? How do you prevent it being from further release beyond your control? And then regarding the weather map, the mapping, how do you end up making decisions about whether to take in other companies' data or competitors' data, and would you use that, and how would you validate it if so?
Sure, let's take the second question first. I don't see competitors, I see collaborators. There are some companies that are now doing some brilliant research on how do we use our network connected devices or apps to get to early warning. I think it's brilliant, and I'd love to partner with them. It doesn't have to be our thermometer. You want to use our software, our app, make your own thermometer, by all means. I have no concerns about that. We are not a hardware company. We are an early warning system, right? And we're a public health company. We want to advance that. So it's just about making sure that you have the right incentives and you have the right approach. And I think we can partner with CDC and with whomever it is, from Fitbit to, one of my friends is Ben Silverman, who released How We Feel, the Pinterest CEO. And they're doing great work, and I want us to collaborate, right? So let's answer the data question. Let me leave you with the bottom line. I testified in front of the Senate about 12 weeks ago, written testimony, and here's my bottom line. You can have both. You can have both perfect personal privacy protection and have access to information that is helpful. In this case, what's going around will help the individual, the community, the health system, and the government. We know, and you can have both. What you see on healthweather.us is a population level inference, population statistics, the percentage of people ill on a county basis. It is not possible to identify a person. And if you architect your systems really well, and it takes doing, and you got to continue to do that, you can separate the layer of individual data from the layer of population level inference. And that's what we try to do. We still have individual data. I didn't want it. Up until 2 years ago, you weren't even allowed to give us your email address. But my users said to me, wait a second, I got a new phone. I got to download the app again. What happened to all my history? And I said, sorry, I can't give you your history because I don't know who you are. So, we had to implement individual level access. And as a result of that, we get personal data. But again, there are ways to architect the system so that you can have perfect personal privacy protections and a business model that leverages population level inference. And that's what we built, and that's what we're going to continue to build while I'm CEO. And by the way, I'll just tell you this. I box my company into a corner all the time on this. I testified in front of the Senate. Do you think the next CEO is going to come and is going to come in and say, oh, no, we're not doing that anymore? No, because they'll look bad. So I box myself into a corner with public statements all the time on this point.
Accountability 101. Students, we've got just a couple minutes left. Aisha, I'm sorry to grab the mic here, but just one, we probably have time for another one question or two. So is there one that you found in the student list or anything that you want to ensure that they hear from our list?
Yeah, I want to know, was there a time when you ever felt that you were ready to give up? And if so, what discouraged you from doing so?
Are you muted again? Oh, don't blame me.
Sorry, guys. I'm used to Zoom etiquette where I mute myself when I'm not talking because we use Zoom a lot these days. Apologies. Oh, yeah. Those three near-death, all 5 of those near-death experiences were really hard. You know, the people who know me best know that I've been past the point of burnout for years. And that's tough. But I'm so passionate about this cause, and my wife knows how passionate I am about this cause. She's a leader here. I just wouldn't forgive myself for giving up. And so I think it's very difficult to find that balance when you're that committed. You know, I don't necessarily have an heir apparent at Kinsa. I can tell you that my most trusted lieutenants never want to be CEO. They don't want to be CEO because they've seen what I've gone through, but they want to help. And so, you know, it's a difficult balancing act. So could I see myself being executive chairman one day and handing over the professional reins to another CEO? Oh gosh, it's one day, please. But you know, it's about persistence and passion. So.
That's awesome. And then one question on a much lighter note to wrap it up for you. So you founded Dance Marathon, and it's gone on to raise, I think, $4 million to help students and all. And what was never clear to me from what I've read on it is you founded it and you were the organizational creative mind behind it, but were you a participant? Were you a dancer yourself in it?
I was an advisor for many years. I'm so proud of what the students have done. They've just taken it to another level. It's extraordinary what they've done. And I'm so proud to be associated with it. It taught me so much. I have never been a participant. And part of that is that
now for your first time here today, you're going to demonstrate for us what it's like to be a participant in Dance Marathon.
I would love to. You know, it's funny. I have aches and pains in parts of my bodies that I did not know could exist, partly because of the trials and tribulations of being an entrepreneur. I'm not sure I'd survive 30 hours at this point, but yeah, one day I hope to be a participant. One day.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Aisha, for joining and being here to co-host this. Students, have a phenomenal weekend. Enjoy yourself. Stay safe. Stay COVID-free. And we will see you next Friday. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all your questions, but we will send them over to Inder in the event that his team can answer any of them for us. And we'll get back to you and post it. I'll post it as an announcement.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody.